Back, we're live. Marco Mangelsdorf here on Energy 808, the cutting edge. And we are joined again by Jennifer Potter. So this is episode 3 of Jennie and Marco. Get into it on energy, politics, and energy. We'll be right into it right after this. Okay, it's you and me, my friend. Episode 3 never seem to run out of interesting, juicy stuff to talk about. Thank you again so much, Jennie, for being back with me and for reconstituting the Marco and Jennie and Marco team on this Monday.
It's one of my favorite things to do these days. I really enjoy it. So thank you for
so much
with me.
Well, I thought, we'll kind of talk about people and energy, because that's kind of a juicy place to start. And I'll bring everybody up to speed that Colin Yost went before the CPN committee on Friday, had his nomination hearing. It was passed out of that committee 5-0, which is as good as it gets, because that's 5 people on the committee, and gets passed on to the Senate. I didn't see anything posted this morning as far as a floor vote, but I gotta believe that's going to happen this week, because the ledge is winding down, conference committees and so forth, and so floor vote. I have full expectation that ideally he'll hit 25-0, which is as good as you can do in the Senate, but at a minimum of resounding majority. What's your take on Colin getting the nod there in the committee?
In the Senate floor or the committee?
Both.
Okay. So, well, I'm really excited that he made it 5-0, because that's actually a pretty tough committee to make it through, and it's intimidating. So I'm very pleased to hear that that was a successful adventure for him. I'm sure he had plenty of work to do to prepare for that, in addition to getting to this floor vote. So this floor vote is going to be, given the precedent that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, the Senate is not very open to inviting new people into the establishment. This is just something that's saying, we don't want to move people around. We don't want to disturb things too much. And so it could be a little bit challenging. So that, I'm hoping that Colin is doing his homework and meeting with our legislators individually to talk about his objectives and agenda for, the commission moving forward. And really just trying to set that foot in front of the other in order to get into the Senate floor vote. This is a challenging time in Hawaii state politics, I think, to be an appointed member of the cabinet. I think it's just a challenging place to be. Our legislators are just they're pretty tough on folks.
I agree. And at the same time, as you know, Colin has been interim commissioner since you departed last year. So he's not a complete newbie. He is somewhat of a known quantity. I watched his hearing from start to finish. A number of people offered testimony in his support. There was not a single voice, either written testimony or verbal testimony, questioning his competence or his wisdom or his akamainas, anything like that. So I was impressed by the level of questioning by a number of the senators that showed to me that they did their homework, which is a good thing. So, fingers crossed that Colin is very close to shedding the interim title. It could be, within days. So we'll keep up with that, certainly. And another person in the news is one Senator Glenn Wakai, former chair of the Energy Committee. He's no longer chair of this session. That's Linda Coit, represents parts of Maui and Molokai. And interesting commentary by Senator Wakai at a meeting on your island there on Maui last week that was picked up by Hawaii News Now. And he, again, voiced his concern about Maui in particular, with 2 power plants there, as you know so well. There's the one in Ma'alaya there on the coast, and then on Kahului, another power plant, both operated by Maui Electric. Mm-hmm. And his concern is with Kahului scheduled to first go offline in 2024, just next year, which was pushed back with, I got to believe, with commission approval, right? That's something that had to run by you guys. Mm-hmm. Pushed out to 2027, which is not that far away either. And then the situation with Ma'alaya is that Mitsubishi notified the parties last year, I believe it was, that as far as replacement parts for the generators there, Mitsubishi put them on notice. It says that we're not making them anymore. So that kind of puts a finite life on Ma'alaya. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, how concerned are you about these power plants, these combustion power plants being retired in the relatively near future, and Maui Electric's ability to bring on board adequate generation to make up for that loss of Ma'alaya and Kahului?
I'm very concerned. I was very concerned as a commissioner as well. And I tried to raise this issue on a number of occasions, and just indicating to the companies and to my fellow commissioners that, there were examples that occurred, for example, of like outages, island-wide outages, where things went out when it was just a single power plant, that we were so reliant on Ma'alaya in order to provide that inertia and that backup ancillary services and just like the capacity in general. And when it failed, and which it did, then the entire island went down. So this isn't a trivial issue. And, trying to consider maintenance schedules and how many parts do we have left and all of that, the commission really needs to dig into those details to understand what is the timeline that we're dealing with. I don't know that we have actually a clear path outlined of what it's going to take for Ma'alaya to come offline, because that's really the question. Kahului is a smaller generator. We have, some synchronous condensers that are going to replace it. That's going to help with some of the energy burden. So it's not as critical as Ma'alaya. And it's also, Kahului should have been retired years ago. It's incredibly dirty. It's the dirtiest plant that we have in all of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So, a good riddance. Let's get that out of here. So I'm not too worried about that. But that capacity, though, that's still important. I don't want the plant. I want the capacity. And can I have my cake and eat it too? I don't know. But in terms of the parts for the Mitsubishi parts for Ma'alaya, this is when this was brought to our attention, you're kind of dumbstruck. And in particular, as a commissioner, it's like, what do we do? You have a plant that you can no longer maintain. They're literally not replacement parts. And so how is it that we can move, forward? And so we're really looking at two plants that could potentially be decommissioned by 2030 and not any adequate replacement generation, and through photovoltaics and storage or anything, nothing on the horizon in the near future that's going to come online that's going to help us kind of bridge that gap. So looking at the delays that have occurred with the renewable projects that were approved in phase one, we're talking about 5 years now, 5-year delays, and so it's 2023. We're running a clock down, this isn't fun and games anymore. And so there needs to be some serious planning on the behalf of the utility alongside with stakeholders. I truly believe this needs to be an open process, that stakeholders need to be involved and in providing input and assumptions into the planning for Maui in particular, but also the rest of the islands. But Maui in particular, the 2 plants going down by 2030, that's just an incredible risk. And, relying on intermittent power that doesn't have the smart inverters because they are older. And, we just need to really, really step up the game of planning at this point and not just rely solely on the companies in order to make those assumptions on those inputs, but have other professionals from the planning department, from the state energy office, from, the DER parties, those people involved in and understanding how they can each contribute to demand side and supply side resources in order to fill the capacity gap that we're going to experience here on Maui. What do you think?
Well, I'm puzzled, and I'm still unclear on and I think maybe I'm not alone in this. I mean, again, Senator Wakai, by the way, so the MECO spokesperson said during the piece that they, of course, take it very, very seriously to keep the lights on, which is what I would expect them to say, of course. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Senator Wakai, Senator Dela Cruz, and others have noted is that talking about renewables is all well and good, but there's something to be said to talk about firm renewables. And what would you define, or how would you define firm renewables, number one, and two, what the likelihood is of developing in a hurry, as in the next handful of years, firm renewables on Maui to make up for Ma'alai and Kahului and elsewhere?
Well, I would think that most renewables that have been defined by the EPA and even by our own legislature in Statute 269-6B includes the combustion of renewable resources as a option for considered renewable energy. And so that combustion usually is with biodiesel or with biomass. And in the near term, that's just not an option. Those aren't viable solutions for either the plant. Biofuel isn't a viable option for Ma'alea or for Kahului power plant. So you would have to actually build a new facility or bring in peaker units that could run off of biodiesel. But you have supply chain constraints, right? So the question is are we ready to move beyond? I mean, what we need is bridge technology, right? When I think of firm renewable, the only one that I can think of that counts is PGV, on Big Island, and that is the resource that is firm, is providing a stable power, and is doing it off of geothermal energy. We don't have that resource as readily available on Maui. There are some spots that I'm told that can provide geothermal resources, but that I can't imagine the permitting and the process that it must take in order to stand up a geothermal plant. And it's not going to happen in 7 years by any means. We know that, not in the state of Hawaii. So in order to fill the gap with firm, we're going to have to bridge this with probably some undesirable, combustion engines that are going. Yeah, it's like steps backwards, right? We were making progress, and now we're going to be moving backwards because there's not any viable options in the interim. I mean, we were looking at the same thing in Oahu for when the KES battery was coming online, and we were looking at the options and the opportunities of bringing like Honolulu CT back online, and how do we bring these other fossil fuel peaker units back online in order to provide the energy. And this is just moving backwards. I mean, we're not even moving forward anymore. So your thoughts?
Well, perfect segue here, because you were on the commission when the commission approved the West Kauai Energy Project, which is now being challenged, if I understand correctly, by Isaac Moriwaki and Earth Justice after the commission approved it. And it remains to be seen the timing, of course, of WKEP coming online. And thinking optimistically, when it does, it'll be a big boost to KIUC achieving a higher RPS, renewable portfolio standard percentage. And they would attest as well that it's been far from a cakewalk, and it's still far from a cakewalk with these legal challenges. So my question to you is, there's talk from time to time about replicating pumped hydro across the islands more. I mean, as far as I know, there's not a single pumped hydro facility that is in operation right now. So WKP would be the first.
Yep.
So my question to you is, how replicable is doing pumped hydro from your perspective anywhere else in the state, both from a topographical perspective, from a siting perspective, from a water rights perspective, permitting perspective, and you have to have the water, right?
You have to have the
That
water.
kind of goes without saying. So I know Parker Ranch has looked into pumped hydro from time to time, but nothing, as far as I know, has moved beyond the talk stage. So
Yeah.
what's your take on being able to do more pumped hydro in the state of Hawaii?
Well, I think that we have some serious limitations with water. Water is a big issue. I mean, we don't talk about it very often, but the energy water nexus is a real issue. You know, I mean, we're thinking about how we're going to utilize our resources smart, responsibly, and in a way that's protects the interest of the people of Hawaii. And water being one of the number one resources that we need to use and protect. So, knowing that in Maui, I mean, I think it's almost a complete impossibility because we are so limited in water, and our water resources are it's just not replicable here. I think that Big Island might be an opportunity because there's adequate amount of rain. It just depends on, the topology, I guess. And I wonder how much Big Island feels like it's been sort of this test bed, for these different types of technologies and resources to come online. And is there going to be pushback from, the residents of Big Island if there is something that's proposed in this manner? Now we're seeing community groups become increasingly vocal. So it's not just the permitting department that's adding, like some extra steps in the process, but just truly engaging with the community prior to involving, and getting involved in these types of projects. In some ways, if there was an opportunity for, Earth Justice to have engaged, and they might have engaged with KIUC at the beginning of this proposed project, if they were made aware of it, then perhaps the outcome might be a little bit different at this juncture, because there could be ways to, encourage other types of restoration and other types of protections for the environment that may offset some of the challenges that come from a pumped hydro project. But I think we're limited. I memean, Oahu is probably a no-go. I can't imagine the space that would be required in order to have a reservoir, could provide the capacity needs of, it would just be a drop in a bucket, right? For Oahu, probably not worth the cost. So smaller grids that have fewer, pain points, I think, and in adequate water, that I think kind of is only replicable probably on Big Island, and I don't know about the appetite for that. So,
well, as I think we're both very aware, anything having to do with water moving, water rights, water diversion, pumping water up, letting water come down is really fraught. Yeah. And I don't expect that to change. If anything, I think it's going to stay, intensely debated, and if not more so over time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, the short-term takeaway for now, for me, is not terribly optimistic in terms of being able to meet these kind of looming deadlines of, especially on Maui, of projected plants to go offline. I mean, just to stay on Maui for a moment longer, what do you see as the likelihood if in a year or two, Maui Electric were to come back to the commission and say, hey guys, we need more time to be able to decommission and go offline with Kahului. Can you give us another extension? What's your hit about that?
If I were commissioner, I would deny that request. This is in their proposal in the PSIP. I believe they had the retirement set at 2022, and then it became 2024 as we started increasing the renewables on the grid. And for some reason, I can understand their concern about inertia, and as we bring these plants online, so they wanted that backup power, but in order to take it to 2027, that was, that was not part of when I was there. So, and I think that they had to actually go through quite an effort with the EPA in order to get the permits in order to continue polluting in the manner that they are. And so that's just, this is just a non-starter for me. We need to move beyond that. It needs to close. It's the dirtiest plant in the state. It's wow. So now, I mean, with the AES closed, so there's no reason that we should continue polluting like this. Not at all. Not for
Just
20
point of fact. So you said earlier that neither plant, Ma'alai or Kahului, is able to use Pacific biodiesel in any kind of mix with conventional fuel. Like, for example, Hamakua Energy of the coast here in Honoka'a is using a portion of its fuel going into the turbines coming from Pacific biodiesel. That's not possible on for those two power plants on your island.
So for Ma'alea, from what I understand and what I remember, so the Ma'alea, it would be possible. So biodiesel is a resource. I was referring more to using peaker units. So if you had almost mobile peaker units that you could use biodiesel in, that was more kind of what that frame. But yes, Ma'alea, but no to Kahului. That's low sulfur fuel oil.
Okay,
so it's the bunker oil. And Ma'alea also has some, it has some challenges with the fuel that it takes in as well. So I think it's like there's low sulfur diesel and yes, there's some specifics that need to be met in order, requirements that need to be met in order for it to be a fuel source for Ma'alea. But I do believe that it can be used in Ma'alea, but I'm surprised we haven't yet, other than just looking at the cost of biodiesel as it compares to as diesel in general. It's just not that viable right now, in particular given the rates that we're seeing across all of the state. Nobody wants higher fuel costs because that just means higher electric bills. So becomes a problem pretty quick.
Well, with the time we have left, let's go to the E word, something that we weren't able to get to our previous two episodes here. Equity. In fact, the Hawaii Energy Conference, May 24-25 on your island there at the MAC, will be focused amongst a number of foci on equity. And it's clearly a topic and a value that the Commission has taken up in earnest over the past several years. Jennie, in your words, what is equity? Help me understand in terms of why is equity important? Why should it be important? Why should I care about equity before the Public Utilities Commission?
It's a great question. So I think probably most of our viewers are familiar with the ALICE report, which is the Asset Limited Income Constrained and Employed group of individuals. So it's they're basically around 250% of the federal poverty level. In the state of Hawaii, we have approximately 40% of our residents are ALICE or lower, and their energy burden that they face from electricity is anywhere from, it range from 7 to 14%. And for those that are lower than, 50% poverty level, it can be upwards of 35% of their income goes to their energy bills. So this isn't, and then you juxtapose that with NEM customers who have had the ability to install solar on their roofs back in 2012 and earn a full retail rate, and they are basically paying nothing on their bill, while you have people that are living in poverty that are basically paying 35% of their income on their electricity bills and making hard decisions about whether to buy food and medicine or to keep the lights on. And they constantly are getting disconnection notices, and they're constantly having to scrap pennies together. And that's not equality at all. So the ones that were dishing out the big bucks for these early solar systems were rewarded in a big way, and their payback period paid back pretty quickly. And that it's to the point where they're just riding kind of the wave of free energy. And that, compared to the energy burdens that we see across the state, it's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable at all. And so you have communities that are in disadvantaged communities that are located next to plants that are spewing pollution and are for example, in Kahului, and the Kahului power plant is right next to a place called Harbor Lights, and that's basically almost a project of Maui, but the projects, if you think about that, and it's right next to it. So this is justice, environmental justice, where you're siting these types of plants and these units right next to communities that are the most disadvantaged and are facing the highest energy burden. So how do you tackle this in a holistic way? You have to start one with a mandate from the legislature, which is exactly what we got. We got with a resolution and working with Nicole. Sorry, help me out. I'm blanking on her name.
Nicole Lowen.
Lowen, thank you. I'm sorry. I know her name. I love her dearly. She's wonderful. So Nicole Lowen, working closely with her, the commission helped draft those resolutions to help and really bring equity into a proceeding, so that we were specifically focused on how to target customers around equity issues. And that means looking at low to moderate income rates, looking at payment plans that are a little bit more specific, in particular, looking at rates that are for low-income customers. When I moved to Hawaii and found that there was no low-income rate, that was appalling to me. I couldn't believe that there wasn't some subsidization from the haves to the have-nots in the energy environment that we live in here in Hawaii. I mean, it's just in considering the high cost of living and the high cost of electricity, it just seemed that there should be some distribution of that. Our electricity rates and electricity rates in general are very regressive. And until you move to a platform such as time of use or something where people have more control over their bills and they're not facing these volumetric rates, there's going to be regressive rate making. The burden's going to fall on to low income customers that do face these high energy burdens. So the commission is doing the right thing. The legislature did the right thing to make this a focus point. And I wish them all the best. I want to be there to support them in every way I can. So, and I'm doing so in every way I can. So, but yeah, your thoughts? Briefly?
Well, I'm going to riff off of NEM for a moment, net energy metering. And truth be told, I'm a NEM customer. I appreciate it very much. And I also, I was one of the few back in 2015, which actually supported the end of NEM because it had achieved its purpose of mass adoption, bringing costs down. And in fact, it was a very juicy subsidy. It continues to be, as you know, a juicy subsidy. And yet, it appears to me that it's something of a third rail that I've never heard or rarely heard Hawaiian Electric going public about, hey, we support ending NEM, nor have I heard the commission talk about ending NEM. I mean, essentially, there are 100,000+ customer generators across the state of Hawaii that have net energy metering. Mm-hmm. And in other states, as you know very well, there have been moves afoot to essentially de-grandfather NEM customers and put them in a more fair rate structure where they're not getting so heavily subsidized to the detriment of the low middle income people. Mm-hmm. So why has the commission, why do you think, if you were putting your thinking cap on, why hasn't Hawaiian Electric or virtually anybody else of note gone after NEM and say, hey, we need to adjust NEM and no longer have it be retail compensation?
Well, I can speculate on that in a lot, and there's some politics involved. I'm absolutely certain that if you were to make such a sweeping change, then legislators would be notified and contacted, and there would be phone calls that were made, and things that would occur. There would be a sort of a domino effect, if you will. So. Yeah, I know that's kind of an issue. That's not kind of an issue. That is a major issue in making these changes. And there's some about face on that as well for, I think, for the HECO companies in terms of maintaining sort of this, we've worked with you all along, we're your trusted partner in the energy transition kind of motivation that the customers have with the utility that just offers, I think, too much. Like you said, hundreds of thousands of people. That's a lot of individuals that could write hate letters to HECO if they were to change their plan now. I mean, people get used to the luxuries that they're afforded and will be vocal about not receiving them anymore. Yeah,
that's very true. And psychologically, and this makes intuitive sense, that people react more I'll say, energetically against or in response to the perception of loss
Mm-hmm.
versus, hey, Jenny, I got a really good deal for you. If you buy the stock I'm recommending, you'll make 20%, year over year. And you're going to say, yeah, right. What other bridge can you sell me? But if I said, Jenny, if you don't sell your portfolio, a big chunk of it today, there's a very good chance you're going to lose 20% overnight. You'd probably jump on it. So the
Right.
perception of loss or perceived loss is a huge motivating factor. So I think you're right. There would be an outcry. And yet, I wouldn't like it pocketbook wise, but I would support it if I thought it was, reasonably fair and I wasn't getting 5 or 10 cents per kilowatt hour for my surplus power when retail is now 45, 46. But I mean, I'll go on the record now and say that as much as it would disadvantage me and other 100,000 NEM customers, I think it is time to look again at NEM and to make adjustments as other states have. It's time to do that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Mm-hmm.
Well, on that point of agreement, yet again, so many things on my agenda here that we didn't get to, but of course, the upside to that is that's more grist for our mill
That's
for
right.
a future program. So once again, mucho mahalo, Jennie Potter, for joining me today on Energy 808, The Cutting Edge, and a hui ho.
A hui ho. Thank you so much, Marco. It was a pleasure to be with you again.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.